Key qualifying questions. Now, there can be a lot more specific questions, but I know that you have already heard a lot, so we're just kind of keeping them at the basics. If you can get these nailed as part of your interaction, you can move on to the next tier stuff. Okay. How long does it take you to do your backups? Primary question. Get that answer out of them. If you can't get that answer out of them, okay, then you got a lot more work to do. But if you can get an answer and it's more than 4 hours, it's good. More than 8 hours, it's great. That means there's tremendous opportunity. The key thing is what we're looking for are the responses. There may be many different ways that you ask the questions of many different people before you get to an answer. The first person may not know what you're talking about. The second person may not have the details around the answer. It may take 3, 4 people and multiple different types of ways of approaching the question before you actually get the answer you're looking for. So that's a key thing to keep in mind here. Are you struggling to meet your backup windows? Yes, you need to find out, but to what degree? It's like, I'm at 4 minutes and 4 hours and 5 minutes, and that's really painful. No, it's not quite that painful. But what does the pain mean to the customer? Because that helps you to unearth the value. As you look at this, it can be really very simple. Ask them, do you or does your organization maintain a recovery point objective around SharePoint? Okay. If the admin doesn't know, ask the director of IT. If the director of IT doesn't know, ask the, whoever the assigned IT members are to the business continuity team. Okay. There is an answer, and if the answer is we have an established one, that's okay, but you need to know that. If they have established one and that is below their ability to deliver on backup, you've got a great pain point that's sitting out there like a red herring, and you can hone in on that to show what the value is, to say, look, it's your butt in the seat if you fail to meet that because you're responsible for it.
And I couldn't resist here, but so when you ask, are you struggling to meet the backup window, you also need to understand what that means, right? Like it was alluded to earlier, the Army takes down their portal at night in order to do the backup, right? So if you're not meeting the backup window, the person you're talking to might not care, but the end users might be like, man, this thing, I come in the morning and I have to wait 2 hours for this thing to come back up because they're doing a backup, right? So it's all about the answer. What is the answer to the business, not from the person that you ask? You need to find out. That's why it's the art of qualification. You're finding out that answer. You're not going to get the answer directly from every person you talk to. He might just say yes, and you miss an opportunity because all the end users' hair's on fire in the morning when they can't meet the backup window and the portal's still down, and they sit around for 2 hours because they can't use it. You see what I'm saying? In other words, it's all about the answers here. Those are the questions and those are the answers, but you might have to ask 15 other questions to get that same answer, and you might have to talk to 10 different people.
He does a lot more talking to the people than I do. I get the answers after 3 or 4 people. But he's spot on. The key thing is using your sales qualifying skills to ferret out answers. And you're looking for, basically, a sports analogy, the over-under. You're looking for, is it more than or less than, in many cases when it comes to backup. And if it's more than, then you're in a good position. If it's less than, and it's really an answer and you've gotten that, then it's harder to convince them of the value to justify further investment. And that's what you're looking for. Qualifying, as Derek likes to say, is, look, I want to get to know as fast as I possibly can. Once I get to that point, then I can move on to something else. So you're looking for things that are going to be instructive in how you proceed in an account. So backup buying indicators. These are some of the buying triggers and some of the possible disqualifiers. Caveat, I am not saying that it's as simple and easy as saying, is your SharePoint mission critical? Okay. I'm not advising going in and doing that. What I am advising is, look, you need to come to a decision based on your line of questioning. Is it mission critical? Did you hear them say that in one of many different ways? Or is it not? And if it's not, stop, do not pass, go, because it's probably not something that's really needed in there. We talked a little bit in the previous session about SharePoint maturity. The more mature the environments, and it seems to be, there's been some extensive research done at about the 4-year on mark. Once people hit that, there is a much greater awareness of many of the problems, the subtleties, the pain points, what they would attribute value to be. And so if you can find organizations that are like, look, I've been doing it for a while, I've been using out of the box, I've been using my enterprise resources, I'm ready for something else. Okay? They have a higher level of awareness. Earlier stage, not to say that it's not, but if you have an early stage company and an inexperienced admin, it's going to be hard. You're going to spend a lot more time educating them. It's not a disqualifier, but it definitely throws up a little bit of a flag. If they're more sophisticated in that, they're more experienced in the admin, they've developed and they're using workflows, they have applications that now reside on top of SharePoint where they may not acknowledge that SharePoint is mission critical, but if you find out that they've got an application based on their extranet that transactions and dollars are flowing through, by God, that is mission critical. Okay? So you need to understand and ask the right questions to get to that point of, is SharePoint mission critical? Well, if you find out they have applications, that's once again a good indicator. And have they taken the time to develop methodically recovery point objectives for the organization, or recovery time objectives? If they do, I'm going to show you some stats here in just a moment. It's a huge indicator that they're in that top quartile. Okay? Only 1 in 4 companies actually establishes these kinds of metrics. Okay? It's something that it takes a little bit more awareness, and when you find that, they take it seriously, because usually it's highly visible. Somebody somewhere in that organization has a dashboard that has all of the key service level objectives and attainment levels within an organization. Okay? And so somebody's keeping track of this. It's a good way to know that they're primed for an opportunity for the product. Some of the disqualifiers, once again, take it with a grain of salt. These are things that just say, you got a bigger hill to climb to get there. I've never purchased a third-party product, or my organization has never purchased one. Why? Maybe they're a small organization, and this is good enough. The 80-20 rule kicks in. I'm not having any problems with it. Or I just don't, my management doesn't see the need. They grudgingly bought into something. We've used it, but they're not willing to go that extra mile, even if we build a business case. So they're the kinds of things that give you an indicator that these people are going to take X amount of my time. I'd rather go get a deal that's bigger for a smaller amount of my time if I have that luxury.
I agree.
All right. Here's a couple of things that may be tactics that you have not used before in selling backup. Okay. First one here, this is one of the questions that we ask those many people who have come through our developing successful backup and recovery plans. And does your organization have a SharePoint RPO? Okay, so 2 in 5 say yes. Equal amounts say no, and the rest don't know. Okay, so that means that if they don't know about it, most likely either they're too junior in the organization, or realistically they haven't ever thought about it, and the answer is no. They just haven't come to that realization yet. So when you have a recovery point objective, there's a couple of key things that we have learned. I've learned this over about 12 years, touching upon the disaster recovery in the business continuity space. We checked it with Gartner. This continues to hold up in the application-specific space for SharePoint. Right now, companies who are establishing RPOs tend to hone in on a 4-hour RPO. This is not a transaction system where if you have 15 minutes of outage, you've lost $100K in revenue. They have a higher tolerance for things to be out. It's out, work on something else. Work on another project, have your meetings, whatever. But once you get beyond 4 hours, it starts to be painful for the organization. So a best practice tends to be around 4 hours. The companies that are defining best practices and are looked to in their industry. So ask the prospect, okay, do you have one? Yes, no. And if you do, is it 4 hours or less? And this is a key point, okay? If you don't have one that's 4 hours or less, you are not really establishing yourself based on best practices of your peer group, okay? Your peers are saying, yeah, we got it covered. 4 hours, that's our target. You're telling me 8, 16 a day, don't have one? Okay. You're going to lose a lot of respect in that peer group. This becomes an emotional item for people when they realize, oh crap, I'm kind of the guy who's the laggard, who I don't really get it. You know, you look around the poker table, who's the sucker there? If you can't spot him, it's you. So they need to realize and feel some pressure from themselves about how their peers are doing things. And if they have it, now ask them the real money question. Okay, can you meet that? Can you prove it? How long, when you do every single one of your backups, does it take? If your backup takes longer than your RPO, game over, you've already lost. That customer has already lost because they cannot meet that objective. If they ever have a data loss event, they've already exceeded that. So keep in mind, many of these people are relatively new to or junior in the IT world. Okay? A lot of these concepts aren't things that they really understand. Educating them on this just by asking the questions will force them to think about this. We have some great tools that they can use to really come up the curve and look like the expert in their organization, so that instead of being the one who's out of the loop, they're the one who's defining the loop. So I would use this quite a bit when you get into backup scenarios, because it can be something that really helps you to frame it up in a way where they say, it's a must-have, not a nice-to-have. I can't meet this, and I'm behind the curve. I've got to get this fixed. Second thing, selling the don't be that guy message. What I mean by that is, when in the world of backup and recovery, as Steve said, backup is a science, recovery is an art. The more complex and the more moving parts and parts of the process that you have that are involved in a recovery, the higher likelihood you will fail. So our product is great because we simplify that, but more on that in a minute. So only 1 in 4 organizations have run a SharePoint recovery test. Okay. The other 75%, I don't know if it'll work. Okay. And out of those 25% that actually do a test, 70% of them fail. Okay. So that means 7.5% of companies, 1 in 15 companies, has actually tested and know that they can do this successfully. That's a pretty big failure rate. Okay. Now, out of all of those organizations, 93% actually had to change their plans, their process. They got the wrong permissions, who owned stuff, who they went to, where things were located. Even if they succeeded, a lot of those people who succeeded, counted it as success, had to go back in and change their plans. Okay. This is really kind of an interesting thing, because when you get down to the fact of, all right, what's the chances of me personally as an admin ever having one of those disastrous events? And I'm not talking a tornado that takes out my entire data center that I'm just a small fraction of, but something taking me down. Okay, 48%, 1 in 2 people are going to experience in their career a career-limiting potential event. Okay? Out of those that have it, 85% of those will fail. Okay? You're going to be out on the street. That's a pretty high percentage of people who will have to find a new job at some point. Okay? Now, don't be that guy. There's a simple, easy solution. Okay? What we're providing here with SharePoint Backup 5.0 and StoragePoint 5.0 is the ultimate safety net. Okay? And what you need to have is something that is SharePoint, to mitigate all those risks and raise your chance of being successful when you have to have that recovery event. It's got to be SharePoint specific, has to cover the total SharePoint environment. That's the SQL database, the externalized content, the config files, all that stuff. It needs to be automated, because let's face it, anything that has human intervention required has a much, much higher, order of magnitudes higher chance of failure. Requires one job. If you simplify things down to a single process, a single job, okay, there's very little room for things to go wrong. Okay? As long as you have somebody that was purpose-built with the expertise to make that one job work right, which we can prove, okay, that is a fantastic solution. And then on top of that, it minimizes your backup time, so you can almost always overachieve on your RPO. That's why the customer needs this product. Okay? You have ample opportunity to light a fire under these people. Some of it's the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Other is peer pressure. Get them thinking, I'm behind the rest of my peer group. I don't want to be like that. Okay? This is a huge opportunity to use just a couple of things: peer level recovery, pressure, and going out and testing and knowing that you're going to be successful to basically get them to buy into this message. So top differentiators and benefits, just a kind of a quick recap here. Lightning fast backups. Okay, this is where, as Steve said, he's had one of the beta customers up to 600 gigabytes an hour for backup speed. Okay, that's over what we were previously talking about, 5 gigabytes, 10 gigabytes. I mean, big difference. And it also happens to be a very big differentiator for the time being against AvePoint. We can create some good FUD out of their own documentation that show 30 gigabyte an hour limitations. Okay. Now, they have some mixed messaging, but hey, it's their own documentation. We just point customers to this section, and they'll say, wow, okay, you guys can do this, and they do that. That's a nice benefit and differentiator. We've talked about it many times, but I want you to make sure you understand this. We're protecting 100% of this environment for this application that extends for the first time in a single place out to your blob content. Okay? All of this stuff gets backed up in one place with one job with one button push. Okay? Creates backups in minutes. Okay? Can't overstate it. If you're going from hours to minutes, you just, for almost every single company out there, have now achieved and undercut your RPO by a substantial margin. You can grow 50 to 75% for the next decade and still be able to meet this with one little investment right now. That's pretty simple. Otherwise, you're fighting the fire year in, year out to meet this. So help them make their lives easier. One simple thing cuts their backups to minutes, and now they've got a rock-solid solution, and they don't have to worry about this part of their job on a daily basis. Restore using their existing backups. Once again, it's taking objections off the table. They now can go out there and they can be partnered with, friends with, whatever you want to call it, with that network, DBA, the people who are going to say, look, I already have ways of doing things. You guys can work collaboratively. It's not going to impact or slow things down. Going to make the DBA or the network admin's life a lot easier, and it's going to make that SharePoint admin be able to get a lot more value out of what those other guys are doing. It really helps to smooth the sell out, and as Steve said, he's putting his money that this particular feature is going to be the one that helps you get into more opportunities than anything else. And the last thing is, just get the end users to do their own work. Okay, they'll be happier for it. The admin will be happier for it. It takes less time. Once again, it's making their lives that much better.